Good morning, ladies and James, and welcome to my Logoria live stream. Maybe if we pull this down a bit. So, I wanted to have a look at something. I still am trying to edit through all of yesterday's psychobabble and produce something coherent. There is something coherent in there in my criticisms of Dennis Prager and his Prager University. I think it's definitely a propaganda machine. Of course, anyone would have thought that, but I think most people assume it's a conservative propaganda machine, and I think conservative, liberal, these are not the important categories here. The important category here is the Jewish one. It's a push against anti-Semitism, and this mission, this point of view, this goal has become so common in American politics that I think most Americans don't even recognize it when it's happening. And I don't believe it's a valuable or good goal to have, because it's all about finding the enemy, rooting out the enemy, and disarming the enemy. The enemy being whoever the Jewish people deem to be an anti-Semite. This kind of mechanism in anyone's society, the Red Scare, the Nazis searching out Jews, now Jews in America are searching out anti-Semites. It's always been a negative. And I think the attitude of someone like Prager and his cabal in America is is as negative and harmful as the Jews say the Nazis were. No, there aren't concentration camps set up, although Israel is doing as much bad now and has done far worse, really, than the several years that the Nazis were in power. But it's not a question of that. It's a question of practices and whether or not ideologically we have effective vocabulary, effective terminology, whether the definitions are accurate to who we are as human beings. I think that's where a push like this, a campaign like this against anti-Semitism, which is, as I said yesterday, in Christian traditions they have this evangelical attitude, which comes from the Greek for good news. Jesus brought the good news, and the good news was that all you have to do is believe and you're saved. God has forgiven you for all the bad things you've done. A complete break away from the Jewish attitude of guilt and having to answer to the high priests and to the community at large, etc. Jesus was like, look, it's you and God. A huge break away from the Jews. So all of this talking about Judeo-Christian and trying to connect these two ideologies, which are so distinct and which are so contradictory, the one could be reduced to Jewish, to the tribal, and the other to the individual. To throw them together is to make the individualism of Christianity into a tribalism. And that's also part of the reason that I'm disturbed by this. I don't think people who are members of a church find that too confusing or concerning, because they are already thinking in a tribalist way in terms of their church and their own religious community. Anyway, I thought it was funny that when I opened my video from yesterday, all along the list of recommended videos were Prager videos, interviews with Prager and Prager videos. And I just happened on this video that the very popular YouTuber, apparently, Crash Course is what it's called, and the guy's name is John Green. I guess in 2014 he was considered one of the 100 most influential people. I don't know if that was in the United States or in the world, but he's had quite a lot of popularity, and he does these history. He's also a novelist and has won some awards and things, but he does these history videos. He's working in tandem with his history teacher from high school, from what I've gathered. So he's making a similar case indirectly about this close connection between Judaism and Christianity. And I suppose this is what they are now teaching in high schools and so on. And I would say if that's the case, I assure you, in my opinion, I am certain that it's a product of lobbying, of the Jewish lobby, etc. I hope they're not just reducing everything to a point of view and historical record, historical narrative rather, that has as its goal not the truth and not to reveal history, but instead to manipulate people so that bad things don't happen, such as anti-Semitism resulting in some kind of a Holocaust situation. So let's watch a little of this. I don't know if you can hear it very well with my mic. I guess you can. Let's watch a little of this video and see what he says.
Hi there, my name is John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about Jesus. So this is a Roman coin from around the time Jesus was born in the Roman Empire, and it calls Augustus, the emperor, the Son of God. So let's just state at the outset that in 4 BCE, being the Son of God, or at least being the son of a god, was not such an unusual thing.
So immediately we can see that this is not a Christian viewpoint. This is a non-Christian viewpoint, which would be consistent in this case with the Jewish viewpoint. The historical record at this point in time, and it's evident in terms of our acceptance of and our view of the qualities, the aspects of the Holocaust narrative. That's ensconced within American history. I won't speak of the rest of the world, but within American history, this view it certainly affected me all through my life in terms of how I viewed German people. I had a great prejudice against Germans because I was taught that they were taught indirectly through movies, through TV sitcoms. Germans were constantly being made fun of differently than Japanese. And most of the time that I hear someone in America talking about Germans, it comes back to the Nazis and to Hitler. Very seldom are Germans spoken of apart from that narrative, in my experience. And this man is giving us a history of Christianity, an objective view. One guesses he may or may not be Christian. I don't believe he's Jewish, although his name is Green, and normally a person named Green, I don't know, you could check the statistics, but more often than not I find that people in entertainment and in the spotlight who are named Green are Jewish in origin, which would raise a red flag. You'd wonder, well, why is this Jewish person telling us about Christianity, just as Jewish people might certainly do get their hackles up when they find Christians talking about Judaism. So he's telling us that this Son of God idea is not something really specific to Jesus. It was a common thing at the time, and of course it was a manipulation of the people. There's no truth in Jesus being the Son of God. We all know that because our religion is science, after all. None of us are Christians, or if we are, we don't even need to watch this history video because we've already lost the thread. Just bear with me.
But a poor Jew being the Son of God, that was news.
A poor Jew being the Son of God. Okay. I don't know. Why? Why poor Jew? Why would that be news? I'm curious. I don't actually know who his history teacher is. With his brother Hank Green. um, I'm sorry. I just need to look real quick at who these people are. Well, it's hard to make out. It's funny how on Wikipedia you always there's a advertisement of entries, people, individuals who are Jewish, but you very seldom get the non-Jews and their affiliations. Very seldom. It's just, generic white guy. What I was looking for, what I was hoping to find is, I remember reading yesterday that Green spent 5 months working as a student chaplain and was going to become an Episcopal priest, so it's unlikely that he's Jewish. But he does his videos with his history teacher, and I wonder who this history teacher is. Crash Course, Project His Brother Green, in 2012. Oh well. All right, fine. I'm off the subject. All of this will be edited out, of course. I wish I could see who arrives and who. Look, there's no one here. No one is watching me. I feel so popular. But I'm gonna, this is actually something raw feed that I'm going to edit later into what I hope will be something coherent. So that's why I'm doing this. And why not do it live?
Any understanding of Christianity has to start with Judaism, but Jesus was born a Jew and he grew up in the Jewish tradition.
Okay, so any discussion of Christianity depends upon Jesus' origins. I think that's a false statement right at the beginning. You don't have to learn about Judaism as I call it, in order to understand Christianity. Christianity has its own history, quite apart from the Jewish history. And even though the Old Testament is found in the Christian Bible, I would still argue that there was a breaking away, ultimately, from the Jewish ideology, certainly from the Jewish traditions, but Christianity is a response to Judaism. So if you want to understand how and why Jesus responded as he did, then you need to understand Judaism. But to say simply that you need to understand Judaism because Jesus was Jewish is not telling us the actual story. It's leaving it open to the idea that the two are compatible, and it's a natural evolution. It's not. They're incompatible, and it's a breaking off. It's a break from, but he doesn't speak of it that way.
Many teachers spreading his ideas in the Roman province of Judea at the time, and he was part of a messianic tradition that helps us understand why he was thought of not only as a teacher, but as something much, much more. Let's go straight to the thought bubble today. The people who would become the Jews were just one of many tribal peoples eking out an existence in that not very fertile crescent world of Mesopotamia after the agricultural revolution. The Hebrews initially worshipped many gods, making sacrifices to them in order to bring good weather and good fortune, but they eventually developed a religion centered around an idea that would become key to the other great Western religions. This was monotheism, the idea that there is only one true God, or at least that if there are other gods, they're total lameoids. The Hebrews developed a second concept that is...
So, I'm not sure if he's saying they originated the concept. Of course they didn't. They were the Zoroastrians prior to this. And there were most communities that had many different gods that were polytheistic still had one god that was over all else. It's interesting to read, for example, the Greeks are thought to just have been a polytheistic society, but if you read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, for example, he's really speaking of a god and not of the gods. Like there was a god over all the other ones, and not Zeus, but a sort of godlike, very much a monotheistic conception. So this idea that the Jews invented monotheism, which is one of Prager's contentions, is, I believe, completely false. I was taught this, by the way, all through as a child, and then later even in the university people were saying this, and it's a false statement. It's very misleading because it gives Christians the feeling that they have chosen the right God because this was the first God of this kind. That's what I remember feeling that way. I remember having that response. And I remember being told in that context, it's good that you're a Christian. It's good that you continue to be a Christian because this is the one true God. And why is it the one true God? Well, for one thing, scientifically, historically speaking, it's the first God.
Their religion as well, the idea of the covenant, a deal with God. The main man in this, the big mocker, was Abraham. Not to make this too much of a scripture lesson, but it's kind of hard to understand the Jews without understanding Abraham, or Abram as he was known before he had his big conversation with God, recorded in Genesis 17. When Abram was 90 years and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect. And I'm going to make a covenant with you and a bunch of cool things will happen, like you're going to have kids. And
this is just getting on my nerves. I'm sure I could sit through it and find the conspiracy of thought that I am looking for, but he's just getting on my nerves. Okay, I'll keep going. Whatever. No one is watching anyway.
Descendants will number the stars, and you can have all the land of Canaan forever. It's going to be awesome. I'm paraphrasing, by the way, Thought Bubble. So God promised that Abram would have kids with his wife, even though the dude was already like 99. But there was a catch. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised. Keep it PG-13, Thought Bubble. Now that is asking a lot from a guy, especially a 99-year-old geezer like Abram living in a time before general anesthesia. But those were the terms of the deal, and in exchange, God had chosen Abraham and his descendants to be a great nation. From this, we get the expression that the Jews are the chosen people. Thanks for keeping it clean, Thought Bubble. So some important things about this God. One,
it's interesting the way this is presented to us. God said these things, not that the Jews invented this myth, but that God actually said these things and chose Abraham, and for that reason, because of that choice, we call the Jews the chosen people. That's so off. That's so off that gives a very false view of Christianity, in my opinion. Because Christianity was, in some sense, a response to that. If anything, and I guess I'm pushing the envelope a little here. I'm interpreting rather deeply. I'm not sure what the School of Divinity would say in response to this, but if anything, I think Jesus actually recommended that the Jews stop thinking of themselves as the chosen people and see themselves instead as children of God along with all other human beings.
Singularity.
Love thy enemy was a direct response to the extent to which Jewish people were so tribalist that they were compelled to massacre and even genocide their enemy.
Using the masculine pronoun because that's what Hebrew prayers use, does not want you to put any gods before him.
Oh, so he uses the masculine masculine form to refer to God only because that's what the pronoun the Hebrews used. At least he's aware of how sexist it would be. I to be honest, I sympathize with the guy having to present something like this to a wide audience in America where everyone can get their toes stepped on.
He is also transcendent, having always existed, and he is deeply personal.
He's transcendent, having always existed. I've never made that connection. Immortality, eternal existence is the transcendent aspect of God. That's a sad reduction, I think. That I don't believe that's the transcend. Transcendent means like transport, is to go from one place to another, not up, but one place to another, like ascend, descend, transcend. But to transcend, you have to go over obstacles to get from one place to another, whether it's the distance itself, but I prefer to think of it as a wall. You have to get over a certain wall, an obstacle of thought to transcend you're transcending something, right? You're transcending your social identity. You're transcending the social conventions. You're transcending the limits of personality that your family or the society has placed on you, or that your religion has placed on you. That's the meaning of transcendence. And he's connecting the idea of God's eternal quality to the transcendent, and I don't see the connection.
With prophets, sends locusts, etc. But he doesn't take corporeal form like Greek and Roman gods do. He is also involved in history, like he will destroy cities and bring floods and determine the outcome of wars and possibly football games.
Okay, he says he's involved in history and he will do all of these things, and he fails to say that he will do all these things in the interest of protecting his chosen people. He doesn't just randomly affect history. He affects history in the interest of, in every case, responding to the Jews, responding to that chosen people. Not to humanity, not to the world generally, but to that chosen people. So, for example, the flood is said to be because the Jews were not living as God wished them to live. And the fact that they were banished from Egypt and lived, 40 years in the wilds, in the wilderness, and so on, was all a punishment. But there were also many instances when the enemies of the Jews who were threatening them from outside militarily were trounced in the name of God. And again, that's a profound difference from the kinds of things that Jesus was recommending. Even turn the other cheek is so profoundly different that, again, what I keep talking about here, Judeo-Christian as a term is just a manipulation of the way Americans think. It's not in any way historically valuable. It confuses the issue. It's a lie. Judeo-Christian as a term is essentially a lie that is being told to specifically the American people, I guess.
All games. Probably most important to us today, and certainly most important to Jesus. This God demands moral righteousness and social justice. So this is the God.
So it's important to Jesus that this God demands moral righteousness. We're moving into some very dangerous territory.
The Hebrews, Yahweh, and despite many ups and downs, the Jewish people have stuck with him for, according to the Hebrew calendar at least, over 5,700.
They've stuck with this God rather than another one, as if they elected him, or as if they had some choice.
Years. And he has stuck by them too, despite the Jews being on occasion.
Oh, this God stuck by the Jews. I can't make sense. On the one hand, he seems to be approaching this as if it's just historical, as if it's just an aspect of history. On the other hand, he seems to be accepting the Jewish idea, the Jewish point of view as his own.
Something of a disappointment to him, which leads to various miseries, and also to a tradition of prophets who speak for God and warn the people to get back on the right path, lest there be more miseries. Which,
once again, it's so reductive to act as if the prophet tradition, or the individual responding to his or her community in this tradition of prophets, specific to the Jewish history, is a quality of God punishing, etc.
Brings us back to our friends, the Romans. By the time Jesus was born, the land of the Israelites had been absorbed into the Roman Empire as the province of Judea. At the time of Jesus' birth,
the land of the Israelites, we've really hit on something political there also, haven't we, in terms of Palestine, etc.
Judea was under the control of Herod the Great, best known for building the massive temple in Jerusalem that the Romans would later destroy. And by the time Jesus died, an expanded Judea was under the rule of Herod Antipater, also unhelpfully known as Herod. Both Herods ultimately took their orders from the Romans, and they both show up on the list of rulers who were oppressive to the Jews, partly because there's never that...
The list of rulers who were oppressive of the Jews. It's funny because they have now a list of anti-Semites, right? They have a list of Nazis. Up until a couple of decades ago, they had a list of Nazis that they were looking for in South America and other places. There's always lists, aren't there? Southern Poverty Law Center has a list. Anti-Defamation League has lists. And if you get on that list, boy, then it's public. It's like when I hear Americans are so amazed that Chinese people put individual citizens on a list and advertise the list if they get deep into debt or if they are in some way unable to meet their financial responsibilities in America. And Americans say, oh my goodness, it's like putting a credit rating, like a government putting a credit rating in a public place. Americans are really up in arms about that. But when it comes to these lists that these Jewish people produce, these Jewish organizations produce, of anti-Semites, in many cases completely unfair to call the person an anti-Semite. And a manner of just silencing and dismissing their thought because it doesn't fit what this small minority of Americans is constantly trying to control what is said and what is thought about their group because they're afraid that it will become a danger. And now having this Holocaust narrative, they have a rationale. They have evidence of how important it is to create these lists and to ruin people's reputations and so on. So he refers in this to a list, which of course doesn't, I don't know, maybe there is. Maybe the Jews made a list of the emperors or the rulers that were bad to them. And look, it's come down in history thousands of years later. And we just take it for granted that, that must be the case then. That guy was bad. The way that we think Hitler was the devil, and more than likely he was no different than Obama or Reagan. I mean, these are just politicians, for goodness sakes. Stalin, even. However bloody the reign, Stalin, of course, I think far worse than Hitler. What do I know?
Religious freedom in an empire. Unless you are, wait for it, the Mongols. Or the Persians. Also, they were Hellenizers, bringing in Greek theater and architecture and rationalism. And in response to those Hellenistic influences, there were a lot of preachers trying to get the Jews to return to the traditions and the godly ways of the past. And
once again, that's a good point in terms of the Jewish peoples were resisting the Hellenistic influences, while Christians embraced them.
The Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Essenes and the Zealots. And one of those preachers who didn't fit comfortably into any of those four groups was Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus was a preacher who spread his message of peace, love, and above all, justice across Judea during his
peace, love, and justice across Judea, as if it's all consistent with Judaism, but it's just a peace and love message added in. Completely untrue.
Length life for his time. He was...
Of course, I say completely untrue, but I don't know, and no one actually knows. The historical record is so sketchy, it's so vague, so blurred by a lack of record keeping and an inability to, there's no printing presses, and the books that come down to us, it's hard to even call them books, they're scrolls. We don't know that much about this history, and you could make a life of trying to find out about that history. A very different approach, I think, than making a life, which many Jewish people do, of propagating information about the Holocaust. I don't think they're studying it. They're propagating a one-sided view of what occurred there that depends on the idea that one race, not Jewish, one particular race is inherently hateful, and that hate could spring up at any time, sort of like a wild animal that you have to keep, chained, because you know that at any moment that wild animal, that tiger, could just reach out and claw you to death. That's the way Jewish people see non-Jews. I'm saying that with all full conviction. That's how Jewish people see me. And that's why they are so quick to make these lists and to wag a finger and say, evil, 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 look, there's the evil. It must be contained.
Incredibly charismatic, attracting a small but incredibly loyal group of followers, and he was said to perform miracles.
An incredibly loyal group of followers. It's funny when you think of what happened once Jesus was taken into custody. None of them would admit to being his follower. Isn't that amusing?
Worth noting, miracles weren't terribly uncommon at the time. Jesus' message was particularly resonant to the poor and downtrodden, and pretty radical in its anti-authoritarian stance. He said it was easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. He said the meek were blessed, that the last would be first and the first would be last. All of which was kind of threatening to the powers that be, who accordingly had him arrested, tried, and then executed in the normal manner of killing rebels at that.
I liked that. He indirectly is saying the powers that be were the Jews had Jesus tried, convicted, and crucified. I think that's true. There's been such a push to claim that anyone who says that is anti-Semitic, and that the history of anti-Semitism among Christians has established itself most often in the idea that the Jews killed Jesus, with this Christian idea that whoever killed Jesus must be our enemy, which is so contradictory, because of course you're supposed to love those who appear to be your enemies. They're not really your enemies. That they think they are your enemies, then you show them love. So I think it's fair to say that had the Jews supported Jesus, which of course they couldn't, because he was recommending that they disband, they dissolve their point of view, their traditions even.
Crucifixion. Also, just to put this question to bed, the Romans crucified Jesus because he was a threat.
There it is. Put the question to bed. That's the way. Just put it to bed. There can be no further discussion of this. It was the Romans who killed Jesus and not the Jews. Although there is the moment, isn't there, when all the Jews are gathered there, and the Pontius Pilate, or whatever his name is, he says, which shall it be, Barabbas the thief or Jesus the miscreant? And the crowd says, kill Jesus. The Jewish crowd says, kill Jesus. Oh, but I know, of course. No. Couldn't have been the Jews. Because if we say it's the Jews, then those animalistic tigers that we have chained to our ideologies, they might just break free and try to kill all the murderers of Jesus.
Their authority.
The point of the story is that the tribalism was so rampant that they couldn't recognize the value of this individual as an individual, and saw him instead simply in the context, in the relation that he had to the tribe. He is nothing more than a relation to the tribe, and if his relation to the tribe is a threat to the tribe, then killing him makes sense. That's pretty much the view in any society. We throw people in prison, we put them to death because we assume that their relation to the group is a threat. Their individuality, their individual value is as nothing to us generally. It's no surprise that the Jews as a, when we put them all in one group that way, it's no surprise that as a community, thinking as a community, and in this case as a very strong tribalist push, it's no wonder that they killed a person who was gaining acceptance, whose ideas, tribalist ideas, were gaining acceptance and followers. Not many, though. No one cared that he was getting killed. They were like, he had 12 followers? A lot of people stopped and listened to him, apparently. Who knows, though? I suspect Jesus is walking around getting sort of, one thing Christians have in common generally is a Jesus complex. So I'll reveal mine and say that it's pretty much like me now. This is probably the sort of reception that Jesus got. Very few people were paying attention to him. The guys that were most popular and they were getting the most attention and had the biggest crowds when they spoke, we don't even know their names now.
Traditions saying that the Jews killed Jesus, very unfortunate, also very untrue. We're not going to discuss Jesus' divinity because, one, this isn't a theology class, and two, flame wars on the internet make me so uncomfortable that I have to turn to camera 2. Hi there, camera 2. I'm here to remind you that 3, fighting over such things, like fighting over whether the proverbial cake is a lie, rarely accomplishes anything.
Oh, is that right? Fighting over. Yeah, and we won't question your point of view either. We're going to put that question to bed, aren't we, Mr. Green?
Plus, 4, what matters to us is the historical fact that people at the time...
Historical fact. What matters is the historical fact. I haven't heard even one historical fact in all of this. I've heard a lot of interpretation and historicity.
...believed that Jesus was the Messiah.
And by the way, this is probably how most people learn about the history of Christianity.
The anointed one, the Son of God. And they believed that he would return someday to redeem the world, which leads us to 2 questions about Christianity. First, why did this small group of people believe this? And second, why and how did that belief become so widespread? So why would people believe that Jesus was the Messiah? First, the Jews...
This is like a question for marketing. It's very much I'm not surprised that this kind of a question is coming up probably in university classrooms at this time. Because it's like, why did this meme take the imagination of the people, and why did it become so popular? Why did this product become so popular? What is it? What qualities of popularity are contained within this phenomenon such that we can bottle them and turn a profit?
A long tradition of believing that a savior would come to them in a time of trouble. And Judea, under the rule of Herod and the Romans, definitely a time of trouble. And many of the prophecies about this savior point to...
When wasn't it a time of trouble for the Jews? Was there a time when it wasn't a time of trouble?
One whose life looks a lot like Jesus's. For instance, Isaiah 53 says the person will be misunderstood and mistreated, just like Jesus was. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their face, he was despised, and we didn't respect him. And a lot of the prophecies, like Daniel 7:14, for instance, explain that when the Messiah comes, there will be this awesome new everlasting kingdom. And that had to sound pretty good to people who'd had their autonomy taken away from them. So some religious Jews saw...
So it has nothing to do with the truth of what he says, nothing to do with a value in the message itself, and everything to do with a particular historical time and place, as if we are all just automatons following historical waves, and if it's hard times or if it's good times, then our opinions differ, and there's no truth to which we respond. There's no human nature for a man like this, for a young, recently graduated university bachelor's degree, probably, or maybe he has a master's. I doubt it. But that's the world they live in. Everything comes down to chemicals in the brain that are responding to pleasure and pain. And so when you listen to something and it rings true, it's probably the product of your personal life, because there's no truth in and of itself, except historical facts, of course. Oh, those historical facts, yes. That's not something you believe. That's something you know.
Jesus in those prophecies and came to believe either during his life or shortly thereafter that he was the Messiah. Most of them thought the new everlasting...
I hope he didn't just say Jesus believed he was the Messiah.
Had their autonomy taken away from them. So some religious Jews saw Jesus in those prophecies and came to believe either during his life or shortly thereafter that he was the Messiah.
Good. Okay. Some Jews believed he was the Messiah.
Most of them thought the new everlasting kingdom was right around the corner, which is probably why no one bothered to write down much about the life of Jesus.
No one was writing much of anything in any case, but the the thing too, it's worth it's worth mentioning the fact that Jesus was more or less saying the world is going to end soon. And in some of the Apocrypha, the books that were not allowed into the Bible, but that were equally historically a product of that time and place, and some of that, it's explicitly stated by Jesus that the world is ending soon. You would do better, Jesus says, to castrate yourself. Men should castrate themselves. Don't bring more children into the world at this time, because the world is going to end soon. When he said this temple will fall before a certain point in time, he was saying the world is going to end. Of course it didn't.
Several decades, by which time it was clear that we might have to wait a bit for this brilliant new everlasting kingdom. I should note, by the way, that the idea of a Messiah was not unique to the Jews at the...
So this computer kills fascists. That places him, this term fascist, the way it's tossed around so readily, really disturbs me. And Prager is one who apparently was talking a lot about fascists. It's a real leftist point of view, the use of the term fascist.
Even the Romans got in on the action. For instance, the Roman poet Virgil wrote of a boy who shall free the...
I say that, but I'm not on the right. Thank you very much.
Earth from never ceasing fear. He shall receive the life of gods and see heroes with gods commingling. Sound familiar? But Virgil was writing about Emperor Augustus in that poem, not Jesus, which points again to the similarities between the two. Both called sons of God, but...
What do you gain by making this similarity? By making this connection?
Sent to free the earth from never ceasing fear, but one ruled the largest empire in the world, and the other believed that empire and the world needed to change dramatically. So why did the less wealthy...
That empire needed to change. He doesn't say that the one believed Judaism needed to change dramatically. He's staying away from the fact, the historical fact. If you want a historical fact, that's the one he might have hit upon. Instead, he acts as if Jesus wants the Roman Empire to change, and that's utterly untrue. I would refer to that one line. All of it's a mythology, right? All the stuff surrounding Jesus is just a collection of mythical moments of little difference, in my opinion, than polytheism in Greece. We've just created all these myths around this character, and one of these mythological moments is the idea that you give to Caesar what is Caesar's. This is one of the quotes from Jesus. And essentially, I think what Jesus is saying is give the money away. Stop using the money. Give the money in your pocket back to the one who owns it, which is certainly true. You don't own the money in your pocket, by the way. It's not yours. The money in the bank, it's not yours. It's the government's, and the government can change the value of it at any moment. They can change they can make it just paper and say, that's no longer the money, and you have nothing. You depend upon this system, and you live your life, most of you in America. I know they pushed me to live my life as if money was everything, and I was being immoral. I was being immoral if I didn't save money and so on. And it's an absolute lie. But in any case, I think that was Jesus's response to the Roman Empire, was just stay away from it. It's not a part of you. It's not important. It's not even worth thinking about. And he says that as if Jesus was trying to reform the Roman Empire, as if he was a social justice warrior of his time. If he was a social justice warrior in any sense, he was trying to reform the community in which he lived, the Jews. He wanted them to stop being so tribalist and to stop thinking as a community and to think as individuals. That's my interpretation. I'm standing by it.
Famous Son of God become by far the more influential? Well, here are three possible historical reasons. Reason one, the Romans continued to make things bad for the Jews. In fact, things got much worse for the Jews.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just have to see. Is he saying this is what Jesus wanted?
Needed to change dramatically. Empire in the world, and the other believed that empire and the world needed to change dramatically.
Bullshit.
So why did the less wealthy and famous Son of God become by far the more influential? Well, here are three possible historical reasons.
Historical reasons. It's like it has the stamp of the historian on it now. Let me give you the official story. Science, the experts have decided.
One, the Romans continued to make things bad for the Jews. In fact,
okay, so because the Romans continued to make things bad for the Jews, Jesus wanted to change the Roman Empire because he was a tribalist.
Things got much worse for the Jews, especially after they launched a revolt between 66 and 73 CE, which did not go well. By the time the dust had settled, the Romans had destroyed the temple and expelled the Jews from Judea, beginning what we now know as the Jewish diaspora. And without a temple or geographic unity...
Beginning the Jewish diaspora. It just seems a mistaken point. Jewish diaspora is an actual community of people who consider themselves a nation, but who live in many different parts of the globe. Which is, again, a big part of the reason why the Jews have had so much trouble throughout history, because they claim to be of a different nation than the nation in which they live. And to the extent that they succeed within the nation, they are parasites, and they are feeding on the wealth that this other nation is producing without giving back. They make a show oftentimes. There's a kind of a, okay, so since we have to live this way, they tell themselves, and 1,000 years ago they were saying this to each other, because we have to live this way, we need to be philanthropic. Anyway.
Jews had to solidify what it meant to be a Jew and what the basic tenets of the religion were. This forced the followers of Jesus to make a decision. Were they going to continue to be Jews, following stricter laws set forth by rabbis, or were they going to be something else? The decision to open up their religion to non-Jews, people who weren't part of the covenant, is the central reason that Christianity could become a world religion instead of just a sect of Judaism. And it probably didn't hurt that the main proponent of sticking with Judaism was James, Jesus' brother, who was killed by the Romans. Reason number two is related to reason number one, and it's all about a dude named Saul. No, not that. Yes, Saul of Tarsus, thank you. Saul, having received a vision on the road to Damascus, became Paul and began visiting and sending letters.
This is hard to listen to because it's such a, again, a reduction. I know it's crash course, but that's not what crash course means. It doesn't mean that you reduce everything to a very simple story so that you can put it into a soundbite. That's essentially what he's doing in saying how Christianity became separate from Judaism. Isn't it interesting that it sounds like, again, marketers working out how best to build their corporation. But I think it was quite different from that. I don't think it was a question of what's popular and in what way will we succeed as a religion, as if religion is a corporation. I don't think that's fair to the ideological differences that necessitated a break from Judaism, from the Jewish community, and beyond that, the extent to which that ideology was like a transformative element, that once that ideology began to infect and to affect the people who espoused it, the Christians became more and more transformed to something more and more different from that origin of the Jewish community. So there's no evolution. There's no to act as if, it's a bit like this Israeli writer. I never remember his name. It's a strange name. He wrote *Sapiens*. He goes to great lengths to explain in evolutionary terms how human beings, we begin as all these different types of primates, and gradually we I don't know if progress is the right word, but we through a series of genocides in which human beings are genociding, like, for example, the Neanderthals and so on. Finally, we arrive at world domination and so on. But this notion that we have come from these, essentially these monkeys, was, for this guy, Haruri, something like that. Damn it, I can't remember his name. This guy is an animal rights activist, and he was trying to, in his mind, he's connected humans to just another species, just another animal, which makes us all the more, tribally speaking, we are part of this tribe of the animal kingdom, and we have a responsibility to the animal kingdom. That's kind of what I see in his book, and I think there's a similar kind of logic to, we are at one with the Jewish community, we Christians. I'm not a Christian, by the way. We are at one with that community, and so as a tribal unit, we have a responsibility to that aspect, that sect of our tribe, the Jews. As if, it's a natural evolution, and we all have the same genetic strain, let's say ideological strain, as a kind of gene pool. And that's a completely false point of view. It's not the God of Israel. It's not that Christians are referring to. It's not the Jewish God that Christians are referring to. That was the whole point that Jesus tried to make. It's not the God to which you point is not exclusive to this people. It's written in the human heart, as I guess I keep saying that. It's something that a pope said in the 90s. It always stuck with me. But that, to me, that's the myth. So out of all of the myths that this guy is producing, and that Jews are producing, and that Prager is producing. By the way, this crash course is not part of Prager. I don't know if I made that clear. There's no natural evolution from Jew to Christian, ideologically speaking. There was a huge rift, and the two ideologies went in their different directions and had their very different histories, and it produced a very different mind, a very different way of thinking. And one or the other is more consistent with human nature, in my opinion, and I think it's the Christian one. And I think the tribalist point of view is inconsistent with human nature. It's interesting, too, that multiculturalism, for example, ideologically speaking, is actually a tribalist view. Tolerance, the way people speak of tolerance, is actually a tribalist view. Because you don't need to be tolerant of fellow human beings. You're forever being tolerant to those who espouse a different system of values and beliefs. Of course, the origins of the word tolerant in the West come from like the 15th century, I think it was. Was it Locke who wrote a lot about, I think it was, he wrote an essay on tolerance, and the whole point at that point in time, it was 16th century, I guess. His point was simply that when people have ideas that don't agree with your own, you should be tolerant of their different point of view. Not about race, it was all about creed. Tolerance as accepting other people's creeds, and in the present day, we've made it all about culture, ethnic identity, race, ultimately. Though once again, somehow the Jewish creed there is no Jewish creed, of course, because there are atheist Jews, but that somehow avoids being called a race. They remain white. It's poppycock.
Jesus followers throughout the Mediterranean. And it was Paul who emphatically declared that Jesus followers did not have to be Jews, that they didn't have to be circumcised or keep to Jewish laws or any of that stuff. This opened the floodgates for thousands of people to convert to this new religion. And the other thing to remember about Paul is that he was a Roman citizen, which meant he could travel freely throughout the Roman Empire. This allowed him to make his case to lots of different people and facilitated the geographic spread of Christianity. Oh, it's time for the open letter? All right.
It's funny that he says it that way, and Paul is famous for his letters and for being imprisoned at a certain point. He acts as if Paul was able to, like a traveling salesman, or like a politician now when they go out and they're stumping. What is it called? Yeah, I guess it's stumping. To get votes, right? And they travel to New Hampshire and they shake people's hands. And so Paul was able to go around shaking people. Well, actually, no. He ended up in prison for most of the time, and he affected these different communities largely, and also due to his epistles, right? The epistles of Paul, his letters. It wasn't simply his mobility allowing him to travel around and schmooze.
An open letter to the fish. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment today. Oh, Stan, it's my favorite album, Jesus.
Okay, I think we've had enough. I've certainly had enough. It feels like nothing really went as I hoped. I do want to continue to look at Prager's books, and I want to look at more of Prager's videos. Of course, I just don't have time if I try to randomly edit all of this. It takes me hours. I spent the entire day yesterday trying to edit the hour-and-a-half live stream. Ended up with like 20 minutes. I also wish, okay, this shows I have 2 viewers, but I don't know who you are. I guess if you say hello, I'll know. Oh, look, I have 3 viewers now. What I would like to ask you, without just getting up saying I give up, which I feel like giving up, but no, I'm going to stick it out a second. And I'd ask you, can you recommend a Prager video that I could watch now in this stream, and to which I could respond? I would like to respond to Prager videos. I think there is, not in every case, but there is a similar kind of propagandistic intention behind most of Prager's videos, that in the end he is attaching, there's a good word for this, I can't think of what it is, but he's attaching this philo-Semitic point of view, which is the antidote to anti-Semitism is philo-Semitism. So if we can attach philo-Semitism to the most deeply and dearly held beliefs of the majority in America, the Christian WASP majority, then we have accomplished one of the main goals that Jews agree is an important aspect of their community's involvement in despite the parasitic relationship, ultimately, their community's involvement in the outer society beyond the fringes of their own little tightly knit group. Just as Christians, would I remember as a Christian, as a freshman in the university when I was a Jesus freak, we were called, and I would go out and witness to people. I would go to the bar street where a bunch of drunk kids would be, and I would gradually find a way to, and this is when I was like 18, I would end up, in most cases I would end up with some kid who was actually interested, who was unhappy with his or her life, and we would talk about Jesus, and I would tell him my story, and listen to him like a psychiatrist kind of, and gradually try to bring him over to my side. And that witnessing was a big part of what they talked to us about when we went to the church. They would say, okay, now this week, remember, you've got to witness and blah, blah, blah. This idea of witnessing could be translated into this Jewish idea of convincing the non-Jews that Jews are good for their community. That's evangelism for Jewish people. And that's a profoundly different self-interest, right? It's so self-interested, and it's I think that's the source of the anti-Semitism throughout history, is that kind of difference between Christian and Muslim communities and the Jewish community. The Jewish community is very, not just self-important, which Prager points to in his own book, which we should look at. Just the title page is fascinating of his book, Why the Jews? And then he gives this long explanation of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism, in my view, comes from that kind of self-interest that the Jewish community consistently exhibits. Did I close that? Or is this it? This is the 9 questions, isn't it? No, this is the one. Why the Jews? The reason for anti-Semitism. That just predictor of human evil. What an amazing thought. So self-important. We are the gauge. If there weren't Jews, then people wouldn't even know how to predict human evil. And I think, if you took Jesus's words at, just the Jesus words, and the church to me is not an indication of what Christianity is, or the Christian ethos is not to be found in any one church. I think you have to go back to the New Testament and try to understand, and you have to bring your own baggage with you. And it helps if you have read the Greek philosophers and the literary greats, even Shakespeare. I think Shakespeare is a wonderful source to understanding the New Testament. And you come at it knowing a great deal when you read the New Testament. And you can recognize the many ways in which something like this, the idea of evil, is not an acceptable reference point to the Jesus narrative. It isn't. He's saying there is no evil that you have to protect yourself from. There is no evil that you need to destroy. The only thing you need to concern yourself with is what's in your own heart. You are before you take your neighbor to court, look into your own heart. This kind of thing. So, predictor of human evil, this is actually, appealing to a Christian point of view. It's appealing to the Christians in the United States who, like that, what's that group? I can't remember what they're called. They stand outside of abortion clinics, and they shame and ridicule the young women, usually young women, going in and out of the abortion clinic. That's the church. That's the Christian church, and that is not Christianity. That's another tribe with pretty much the same values. I would call that's Judeo. Those guys are Judeo, in my view. May I just say, Jesus is not Judeo. So make sense of that. That's a nice little conundrum. That's the sort of conundrum that we get constantly from the Jewish peoples. There's a contradiction within the definition, and it's unresolved. So, sorry, you can't. You're going to have to just make sense of it. And that contradiction serves a purpose, because politically, I can point to one or the other side of the paradox, depending on the circumstances, and free myself. So, I'm not a race. I'm a culture. I'm a religion. So when it serves my purposes, we're talking about a religion. when it serves my purposes. Otherwise, we're talking about an ethnic identity, which is completely distinct. If I told you that Christian, to say you're a Christian is an ethnic identity, probably most Americans would balk, and they would be like, no, it isn't. But if you look up ethnic identity or ethnicity in the dictionary, it's actually could be that you're a fan of the Boston Red Sox. I seem to remember saying that somewhere in another. So yeah, I'm curious if there's a video. Hello, Void Owner. Nice emojis. So if you could recommend a video that I could watch and I could pick apart and show in what way, or I could randomly look for one. Let's see, Prager University. Isn't it hilarious that he calls himself a university? I think it's just hilarious. Fireside chat. Are people basically good? Oh, tell us, Father Prager, with your bachelor's degree in history. Are you a bitter clinger? I don't know.
They feel so betrayed by government.
That's Obama.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. This is
Tonight's topics.
Otto. You know Otto by now. Maybe you don't know me.
Isn't it interesting how he looks like somebody from Fox News? He probably, of course, that's his audience, but what a wonderful coup to have a person with the Jewish agenda posing as a Christian conservative. That's what this guy is. You're being duped.
I'm his sidekick. By the way, you're not allowed, according to some of the animal rights folks, you shouldn't say, I'm his owner. I'm his human companion. Did you know that? That you're not supposed to say owner? Yeah, but I'm okay. I own Otto. And
he's Glenn Beck, isn't he? He's what's the guy's name? Rush Limbaugh. The Jewish Rush Limbaugh. He's even been called the Jewish Billy Graham. I'm sure in many ways he's sincere, but given the fact, once again, that it's a central mission within the Jewish community to manipulate the non-Jews so that they do not become dangerous to the Jews, his presence in this guise is sinister. It just is. It's naturally sinister. I've been doing this for an hour and 10 minutes. Whatever, man. Let's go for 3 hours. We're having so much fun.
We had a man-to-dog talk, and he was fine. Let me give him a little rub, because his head is on this side.
He's such a good guy. Fireside chat. He's like Roosevelt. He's the Jewish Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Aww. And his dog's name is Otto, just like the German guys who, how many Nazis were named Otto? He's a good guy. He's our guy. He's our guy.
Which is nice. I love this guy.
Yeah, you're nice. I'd like to pat his head. You're nice.
All right. Good to be with you. So, for those of you new, this is my fireside chat from my home. I'm Dennis Prager, as I told you. This is a chance for you to know me better and what I stand for. And
it's 30 minutes. We can't sit here listening to this guy for 30 minutes, can we?
My way to get your feedback, because I take your questions, I also get a lot of email from you, and I know that people watch all over the world. We've gotten questions from 52 countries, and obviously there are viewers in many more. So that means a lot to me, and it does this.
I like the fact, though, look at the way he does the topics. They actually have like a time stamp. It's going to tell us when this topic is ended, in part probably because he's so disorganized as a speaker. I certainly am. So, he's won my affection to that extent. He's a very disorganized speaker. Well, good on you. Good on you. We shouldn't have things, even if it doesn't help my students when they don't really know what I'm talking about. Things should not be pigeonholed and delineated and chopped up like pieces of cake. That's not how knowledge is ingested.
For me, it verifies something I believed my whole life, An idea has to be good for everyone to be a good idea.
That's the all-inclusive. That's multiculturalism, etc. See, he can't escape that. An idea has to be good for everyone to be a good idea. Is this a humanist point of view? Is he giving us it has to be good? Why doesn't he say that? An idea has to be good for humanity. So wait a second. An idea has to be good for everyone. Does that include like the mass murderers, the serial killers? It has to be good for the criminals. What about the anti-Semites, Mr. Prager? Can I ask this question, please? Put up my hand. Is it an idea has to be good for the anti-Semites? Because the anti-Semites have ideas that you say aren't good. I wonder, what if the anti-Semites don't like your ideas? You just dismiss them, don't you?
That's all. You can't.
That's all. That's all. That's all.
Have a moral thought. Oh, but it's only relevant to society X or people X. The human condition is the human condition. Cultures are relative. That's fine. I have no issue with that.
Cultures are relative. That's fine. Cultures. What does that mean? Cultures are relative. All cultures are equal. You know, that's the Jewish. That's the Jewish contribution to America's political identity is all cultures are equal. But sadly, the idea that all men are equal, men being human, all men are equal has been pushed aside, and now it's all cultures are equal. But of course, that's not true. When he says that, it's not true for him. Not all cultures are equal. The Jewish culture is special. Not only is it chosen within its own dogmatic ideological footings, but politically speaking, their survival is of greater importance than that of other peoples. Particularly, for example, the Palestinians, perfect example where the Jewish ideology is put into motion by an actual government. You end up with a group like the Palestinians who are worse off and have struggled and suffered far longer than the Jews of Nazi Germany.
He loves this music, this country loves this food, this country loves this way of dressing, this country...
He's so open-minded, such an open-minded fellow.
...has a siesta or a rest time in the middle of the day and eats later at night.
That's something he focused on a lot in the 70s when he was in his 20s, was the fact that, in his first book he says, I traveled to 60 countries, I saw the world, and then I realized Judaism is the way.
None of that matters to me. But when it comes to the ultimate questions of life and good and evil and right and wrong, it's got to be universal. Okay, so I want to return in my opening comments today before I take it.
It can't be universal. Clearly, anti-Semites and Semites, they don't agree, right? So who's judging which ideas are good for everybody?
Questions. I want to return.
Certainly, the Jews have seemed to, the Jews in America seem to believe it's their birthright to act as the judges of what is acceptable and not acceptable universally. Isn't that true? Dangerous point of view coming from this fellow at the fireside with his dog Otto Preminger.
To what I have always known was a major dividing line in the way people look at society. If I could ask people one question before finding out what they think about 10 different issues, I wouldn't even ask them first, do you believe in God? Believe it or not. As much as I believe that is a very significant issue. By the way, this is what I should talk about, because do you believe in God doesn't mean anything. I want to know what God you believe in, and I'll explain that one.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. You see, there it is. There, in all the stuff that this guy talks about, there is an anti-Muslim sentiment, a deep, strong anti-Muslim sentiment, stronger than my anti-Semite sentiment, which is ironic. It consistently, groups like the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center, who claim to be policing hate have the greatest hate, greater than the hate that people feel toward them, toward the Muslims. And Prager consistently, and in his videos, and I see it, I'm amazed and confused to see friends of mine who are conservative who have such a problem with Muslims, who assume that Muslims really have nothing to complain about. They assume that the Israel landing out of the blue, falling from the sky into the middle of their little conclave of countries, Islamic countries, as if that had no effect on the stability of that region. Imagine, I can't even imagine for if they build a mosque in the middle of a conservative Christian small town, a big mosque. That's a really big mosque with more money than anyone else in the town. That's Israel. Israel with the United States behind it, with the United States with American Jews behind it, first and foremost, has completely disrupted that area in only the past 70 years with circumstances that just boggle the mind, that they just handed over a country saying, oh, well, it's only a mandate, it's not really a country. And then millions died, more died as a result of that decision than had died in the Holocaust. Which, by the way, how many died in the Holocaust? Not 6 million, maybe a couple 100,000 of Jews. I stand by this. I am a scientist.
Do it, because it's a very important question.
I have a doctorate.
But that wouldn't be my... If I could ask one question, I will ask, do you think...
Yeah, we get it. We know. We get it.
People are basically good? Because if you say yes, you will think in...
Now let's say if you're asking this question as a person who is trying to decide if the broader host community in which you live in a parasitic relationship, that's not to say that you're a parasite, but you feed upon a host community with which you do not share an identity. So a Jewish person is like, I'm here in China, right? I'm living in China. Let's say that I grew up in China, that everything I do is in China. I have a business in China. I'm married to a non-Chinese person. My children identify as non-Chinese, and we have no other citizenship. We have nowhere else to go. Whatever the Chinese people say or do about us as outsiders from their racial identity or wherever it is, we'd still be national. Oh, I don't know. Asian, Asian doesn't work. That was a bad idea to start calling people Asian. Let's just say Chinese is a race, okay? I'm going to just hypothetically. If I then ask the question, are people good or bad? What am I asking? I'm asking, can I trust whether or not this outsider, these aliens, are going to do harm to me? Are they going to treat me well when I am vulnerable to them? It's a bit like, when a woman asks, are men violent? Or a man asks, are men fundamentally violent? There's a completely different context in which that answer will take shape. Because for the woman, it's a question of a threat. For the man, it's a question of it's including his own nature. Am I violent? So when this guy is asking, are people basically good? I say he is not involved he is not a member of that people. I said it. A people who shall dwell alone, as Professor MacDonald says. I like him. I guess that makes me an anti-Semite. I'm not a member of any groups. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not a member of the oxymoron. What's it called? Occidental? The Occidental oxymoron?
Direction. If you think no, you will think in this direction. You will have almost nothing in common on almost every basic political, social issue. That's how important that single question is.
I like how his books are on the the Scholar. What is this book? still the best hope. Ah, Dennis. Denny.
In fact, you can't be wise, and wisdom is the root of goodness.
Huh? Uh-oh. Brought up the W word.
Political, social issue. That's how important that single question is. In fact, you can't be wise, and wisdom is the root of goodness.
It does make. I hope the next sentence makes sense of that, because that didn't make sense. Now look, I can't laugh at him. I don't make sense much of the time. I'm learning. I used to sit around looking at something like this and think, what an idiot. Listen to all the mistakes he's making. And then I look at myself doing this, which is new to me, right? And I'm like, wow, I am the most idiotic of all the pundits. I'm not even a pundit. I'm just a bald fellow with a mission.
You can't be wise if you don't understand how flawed human nature is.
Flawed. We're only human. See, I take umbrance. I take umbrage. I think it's umbrage. See, there it is, one of those mistakes. I take umbrage when I hear people talk like this. Because it's essentially saying that all these flaws, the only thing that, and this is the Chinese view, the only thing that can protect you from all the flaws of human nature is society. Society is, the purpose of society is to protect you from the flaws of them.
I've never said, by the way, that people are basically evil. If people were basically evil, then it would be absurd to appeal to goodness, right? I never said people are basically evil, not once in my life.
I like the way he formulates that, huh? He's talking to someone from the past, but he is he's a famous fellow.
But people are not basically good. We're a rough mixture. Goodness.
Mm-hmm. People are not basically good. Good. That it explains then why you need to inject your point of view about the Jews into the system of non-Jews, into the bloodstream of non-Jews through the media. That's why, again, why did Jews so aggressively take over the media of a place like America? It's because that's their mission statement. Get control of the information byways and fill and color everything and direct everything, twist everything. I don't want to put it too negatively. Bend it slightly so that it fits into a worldview in which Jewish people are good and we don't want to turn against them. They're so necessary. They're so valuable. Oh, look at all the wonderful things Jewish people have done. I believe this fundamental idea has had much to do not only with the success of Jewish peoples, but also with the extent to which they have been able to take control of a place like America, where Christians are much more passive and are generally being told every week, look, relax, don't focus too much on success, don't give yourself up to that kind of thing. And when you put a Jewish element into the Christian boiling pot, and then the world is their oyster. That's a terrible analogy, but they have a much better opportunity to thrive in an environment in which the people around them are consistently being discouraged from ambition.
Is like gold. It's there, but you have to.
Goodness is like gold. Goodness is like money. It's out there, and you just have to do the right things to draw it out of the world.
Mine it.
You have to mine the gold.
You've got to dig for it. You've got to work hard to bring it out.
This does sound like a kind of worldview of the Proverbs of the Old Testament. If you look at the Proverbs, those are so consistently counterintuitive to the message that you find in Jesus' words. The Proverbs don't fit. They're talking about fools, where Jesus would not be. Well, Jesus does say something about a fool, but I can't remember what the fool is in Jesus. Maybe you could write it in the comments. How many people? Oh. We've had three. Does this mean 3 people right now are watching or with me? The Void Owner. Keep up the good work. You got it, fella. Hey, there's David Johnson. Ethnarch. See, another problem here, there's a delay, right? So I'm seeing your comment, I'm talking to you now, but there's like 15 seconds later or something, you will see that I have mentioned you. Good to see you, though, David. Glad to see you. I forgot where I was exactly, but all I have to do is come back to him. Amazing that he's appealing to greed. He's appealing to, in the Christian tradition, gold has negative connotations consistently. It's the thing that creates the miser. It's the thing that causes these vices to come out in one. Midas is a good example of that. And Midas is really not Midas is Shylock, I mean, again, Shylock, not a Jewish invention, but mining the gold and seeking the gold, that's accepting the fact that you must live within a society and try to benefit from that society in order to thrive as a human being. That's a Jewish thing. The Christian thing is pretty much the opposite. Don't depend on all of that. Give away all of your possessions, put on your sandals and your robe and go out into the world and depend on the kindness of strangers. That was a good movie recently I saw. I liked it. It's called The Kindness of Strangers. I think it was 2019. Zoe Kazan.
By the way, for some people, it's harder to bring out than for others. That's true. I acknowledge that. There is such a thing as a sociopath, people who are apparently incapable of thinking in anything but completely narcissistic terms. But putting those aside for the...
That's a big thing for this guy, by the way, narcissism. And for those of you who refer to this word a lot, you're probably on the left, and I recommend that you just let it go. Just let it go. There's no such thing. Let it go. It's just a way of hating. It's a source of hatred. Any reference you make to the narcissist is nothing more than a source of hatred. There are those who would likely say, yeah, that's because he's a narcissist that he's saying that. And to some extent, I do fall within that category. But I think all I see in the usage of that word is just epithet and hatefulness. Same with fascist. Let it go. Narcissists and fascists don't exist. But let's hear what he has to tell us about the narcissist, the wise old scholar, statesman, rather. That's the way he sees himself. He's a statesman.
Of us, that is human nature. And
okay, so human nature is not fundamentally good. It has to be cultivated and to follow the law. That's his point of view about Judaism. You follow the law. That's the first and the most important thing. If you follow the Judaic law, if you act as they expect you to act, then you're a good Jew. It has nothing to do with belief. You could be an atheist but still be a good Jew. And that's consistent with the idea now, isn't it? That wisdom is the understanding that it's a symbiotic relationship between the individual and society. The individual needs society in order to mine the gold, to cultivate the good. I'm sure many of you agree with that. I don't. And I don't think it's what Jesus was recommending. I think Jesus was, whatever, what I believe is unimportant, but it's a good point to make in terms of where Judeo-Christian just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. That's a profound difference between the Jesus point of view and the Jewish point of view, which is consistent to the present day. Jesus would still say the same things to Jews today that he said then. And Jews would probably have the same response to him today that they had then. They're unchanged. Ideologically speaking, they have been brainwashed consistently.
So much flack on the internet for this belief. People, and by the way, that proves to me that I have hit gold here.
He's hit gold. An idea has to be good for everyone, but the fact that people disagree with him, he's hit gold. I'm sure he has some explanation for that enormous contradiction.
When I get a lot of flack on a position that I take, I realize, whoa, I've hit home, because a lot of people don't want to believe that.
That's what I think when I am called anti-Semitic, when I say these things about Jews, and then I know I must be onto something. That's not true. That's a ridiculous point of view.
Why is it so important?
By the way, I am not his friend. I opened this video to find the man I assume to be present in his writings and in his work generally, and I am finding him. I'm probably unfair, but I'm not here to be fair. I'm just here to locate the ideology behind the terminology that has dominated my life. Just go no further than the word anti-Semitism. Dominated my life, absolutely. The Holocaust narrative has dominated my life. I'm trying to just like the Jews, just like a Nazi, sure, but also just like a Jew, trying to root out the anti-Semites. I am trying to root out the lie that has had such an effect on my life, that has manipulated me time and again, and I have no more patience for it. And I could spend the rest of my life just policing. And what is my form of policing? Am I making lists or something? Am I a member of some organization? Am I getting private funding to protect? No, nothing like that. I want to contribute to truth being the norm rather than these political, psychological, sociological manipulations, which were the main theme of my university experience. I do have a PhD.
Well, it's so important because you can't make a good world, a kind world, if you don't understand what you're working with.
I totally agree with that. You've got to understand human nature, and I say again that all the lies that his definition of human nature serves a purpose for his Jewish identity. It doesn't serve a purpose for humanity. He's not thinking in terms of humanity, unless he wants to say when the Nazis harmed the Jews, they hurt themselves. He would rather protect the next wave of Nazism. He wants to protect them from themselves. But I don't hear that kind of thing. That's what I would like to hear from the Jewish. And you know what? That's the Christian point of view. That would be the Christian point of view. And it's not. It's not out there in what you hear from Jews.
You have to. If you don't understand...
If you're going to manipulate the greater population who is a host community to your parasitic community, you have to understand them. That's essentially what he's saying.
The fabric.
See, how do you make good people is the next topic. There it is. Okay, give us, what is the fabric?
Material. The basic material you're working with, how can you make a nice sculpture? You can't make a...
He should have kept with the analogy of clothes. How do you make a nice suit? Right? He's a suit-wearing fellow, and suits are expensive.
Human if you don't know what human nature is made of.
So is it art that we're trying to make by mining gold? Statues? We make a statue of the gold? That sounds like the Jewish community just prior to Moses getting the Ten Commandments.
Secondly, the most important question any society can ask, the most important, is how do we make good people?
Now already, you see, he's appealing to American society as if he is simply a member of American society. And it fails every time with a person who identifies as Jewish. And it's not their fault, but it's going to fail every time because everything within the ideology that is Jewish has placed a wall between the Jew and the non-Jew. the non-Jew has to consistently be manipulated. So a question like, how do you make good people, is actually about how do you make a good host community within which your small minority tribe will thrive. That's a very different question than the Christian, which maybe is just a product of having been in the majority in America, and that's just my experience. Maybe it's just majority and minority thinking. But the majority, it also is going to think in terms of, how do I make my people good? And it's not through, and it certainly is not going to be through manipulation. It's not going to be through lies. It's not going to be through obscuring the truth in the interest of controlling the psychology of others. And that's the kind of thing that, how do you make good people? Let's hear if he comes anywhere near that. God, how much longer is he going to talk? Well, I say this, and I've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes. Take it easy, Void Owner. I agree. The default stance of Christianity, it is important to understand that. That's what I was saying. Yeah, that for a Jewish mentality, how could we put this without sounding anti-Semitic? Which I'm always, actually, believe it or not, I'm always trying to think, how can I say something without it being reduced to some kind of something you'd find in Mein Kampf. Very difficult, but much easier for a Jewish mentality to thrive within a Christian community than for a Jewish mentality to thrive within a Jewish community. If everyone was Jewish and they were all competing and all for the sake of the tribe, well, you'd get, Israel, which, how much money does Israel depend upon coming from the United States every year? It boggles the mind just how much money America funnels into Israel to keep it going.
It's the most important question. But if you think people are basically good, you won't even ask the question.
That's not true. If you think people are basically good, you won't even ask the question. If you think people are basically good, you won't ask the question. Okay, he's right. You won't ask the question in that form because it's a question of manipulation. Why would you ask a question that involves manipulating people? Why would you ask the question, how do I manipulate people so that they exhibit behavior that I consider to be good? That's the question he's at. Well, hell no, you're not going to ask that question. You're going to ask the question that Christians have asked in this tradition of the humanities, the question we ask is, how do you call out the person's humanity? Because the humanity is the good. What just happened there? I got a call. It's okay, I guess. I don't know. The humanity is the good. So you ask, how do I call out? How do I help people to be consistent with and in accord with their own best self? And their own best self is to be in accord with your nature. The fact that we're so dependent upon society's instruction makes us far more vulnerable to losing the way. As the Tao Te Ching, getting off the path and ending up in a set of behaviors and values that are inconsistent with who we are as human beings. So calling out our humanity is the question one would ask. He's saying, how do you make good people? How do you take this faulty machine and use it to your own best purposes? That's what he's asking. Once, as always, self-interest, self-serving point of view in relation to the social good. The one tribe serving itself at the expense of the other. That's what the Old Testament is it's a narrative of that. In the name of, and always, I'm sorry, but it's always justified because God says it should be so. God says, go and kill every one of those Philistines and see that their seed is no more on the earth. That's how you make good people. You kill off the bad people.
It's
It's just
Silly question.
it's a silly question.
Basically good. You don't have to make anybody good.
No, that's not the idea. But okay, fine, Mr. Glenn Beckenstein.
It's so ironic. The people who believe people are basically good, the people who give me the most flack are almost always on the left. In fact, they're pretty much always on the left. And these are the same people who will say, for example, all whites are racist. So wait a minute. People are basically good, but all whites are racist?
Hey, all whites are anti-Semitic. Why don't you let's talk about that. Let's talk about how all non-Jews are basically anti-Semitic. You'll go there, Palamine. Okay, wait. All right, yeah, all right. He's not saying he wouldn't go there. Fine.
How did that happen? If people are basically good, why is there so much of the things that you hate, right? Homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism.
So he's created a straw man here. It's a straw man argument in which the only people who are recommending the idea that people are basically good are those on the left who actually are consistently pointing to the bad in people. So he's giving as example the leftist who he clearly has a problem with, and it's a straw man argument.
Racism, misogyny, sexism.
Now, what if I were to come to him and say, "What do you mean you think everyone's anti-Semitic?" But you know what's funny about that point of view? Jews can't be. Jews can't be. Well, I mean, they can, but it's a self-hating, which who can blame a person for hating themselves? You really can't. I mean, they need to be instructed. They need to be, a slap on the wrist. Anti-Semite, we need to hang them from the rafters.
All of that from basically good creatures? Isn't that bizarre? It shows you, look, I say this because it's true.
The topic is the left's disconnect. He's shifted. The left's disconnect is fundamentally based in the idea that they assume people are good. What a mistake the left is making. And, straw man argument. I'm getting bored. I'm boring myself now. It's almost 2 hours. I should be keeping track of more of this stuff. I don't know if they're proud that they murdered Christ. I don't get that sense, but certainly, right. Well, they are the arbiters of right and wrong at this point. The Holocaust gives Jewish peoples the power to arbitrate, which they've always been seeking. They actually, they looked ahead to the time of the Holocaust, possibly with the recognition that the end result would be what's censored chats? I call it not pro-Semitic but philo-Semitic, but yes. Right, yes, and again. I'm reading your comments, David, and I'm agreeing with everything. Yeah, it's maddening. It's just maddening. That's why I'm sitting here. I'm entertained, I said before in an earlier video there's a romanticism about it. I feel like the lone voice in the wilderness. I know I'm not alone. But still I feel like I'm going up against something. And when I the end of the day and I sit back and watch a little TV or something and I've done all my editing or whatever, which happily this is keeping me busy, I do feel anger, and I would probably feel it anyway, but I do feel like there's a lot of judgment out there, and that I am sort of just airing dirty laundry, or I'm just walking around nude. That's what it's like. Not a particularly attractive person just walking around nude. My videos complaining about Jews are consistent with that social character, that the role of. And if I take Diogenes, what was his Diogenes of whatever it was, not Diogenes Laertius, but the other one, the one who shat in public and lived in a barrel, PewDiePie recently did a video on him. I was surprised. I will take him as my example. Looking for one honest man. I don't know if I don't want to hear what he has to say about leftists. I'm bored now. Teaching your kids to be good. I mean, it's just going to go on and on. I could sit here, but to be honest, I need to pee. Too much coffee. Should I stop? Have I done enough? No, I won't stop. Fine. I'll keep going. But I'm going to step into the bathroom. So I was thinking just then, if you just thought, if this guy was just like let's say a Baptist, maybe a Baptist minister, and he was sitting in this chair, you were visiting him in his living room, and he's saying all of these things to you, it would have a completely different meaning than if he's actually a Jewish pundit who is doing the Jewish evangelist thing, which I need a different word, like Jewvangelist. I think Jewvangelist works here. He's a Jewvangelist, which is not a good news bringer. It's a bad news bringer. He's saying, like, what did he just say? People are not basically good. People need guidance. People need the guidance of the Jews. That's something he talks about in his book also, that the Jews have this messianic attitude that they have come into the world to instruct the world and to be the conscience of the world. And so if people are basically flawed, and their goodness needs to be mined, then that's right there. We've discovered the purpose of the Jews, what the Jews bring to the table, their contribution to societies in which they are actually the parasitic, they play a parasitic role. They don't fully identify. I mean, for me, I was just an American, first and foremost, a white American. This guy is a white American Jew. He's of the Jewish nation. Muslims also think of it as a nation. Fine, whatever. But in the context of him being a Jewvangelist, all of the things he is recommending have a completely different meaning than if he was an evangelist. And that's an important point. And yet it's such a part of our lives with the media, all the television stations, all the reporters, so many of them coming at us with a Jewvangelistic attitude and presenting it as evangelism. That's where things have become so confusing for me, and where once you open your eyes to this, you see it everywhere and constantly, and it vibrates in your brain, the contradiction. It's like a little quake. Once again, the untruth, the lie, the dissimulation. maddening.
Liberalism is thought through, conservatism is thought through, but leftism is chaos. It's emotion. You can't speak about all these horrible things and then say, oh, but people are basically good. Where did the horrible things come from? Extraterrestrials? Who brought slavery to Earth? Martians? Who brought child sacrifice to Earth? Virtually, if not every society we know in the ancient world practiced human sacrifice, not just child. On mass levels. Basically, good people sacrifice.
Except the Jews. That's I'm sorry, but that's underneath there. They're constantly okay, now it's really going wrong. The Jewangelist, if we may characterize the Jewangelist and reveal the qualities which make up the Jewangelism, we must recognize that when they speak of the ills of the world, they are seldom, if ever, speaking of the ills that have been contributed by the Judaic community. And so there, when he's talking about all these things and he's saying, I mean, ultimately, if he's going to, one thing, his point has, in his first book, his point was that the Jews are free from so many negative aspects of human nature, from the flaws of human nature, in large part because they have developed they've been at it longer than other communities. This is also part of the argument. They have developed a method by which to overcome the flaws of human nature by following this very strict code of conduct. That's kind of their conceit, you know. So as he's saying all of this now, well, all of those communities none of those are the the Jewish communities. The things he's pointing to, human sacrifice, none of those things were part of his. And slavery, you know, he would probably claim not part of, although it was, even in that, Jewish merchants were dominating the field where slavery as an industry was concerned in 15th, 16th, 17th centuries.
Human beings? Basically good people enslave other human beings?
Yeah, actually, I mean, because that's not where goodness lies, in these social attitudes of, you know, your sense that slavery is something bad is not a universal. That's not universal. Ironically speaking, I guess that slavery is not in and of itself a bad thing. We are wage slaves even presently. This black and white view that he offers, on the one hand, is uneducated, on the other hand, is not very philosophical. And I mean, he is more or less like Glenn Bekenstein. But his arguments he presents, this is so like these pundits generally. They simplify everything and they work in coded little memes, you know. Slavery, bad. Nazism, bad. Now let's make an example based on the bad. Not that we perceive of it because we have been manipulated to think in a certain way. I mean, the idea essentially is that you think any of the people that were enslaved, Africans that were, for example, they're not exclusive. In fact, more Africans enslaved other Africans than non-Africans enslaved Africans. But aside from that, we essentially say, and the feminists are doing this to women also, that anyone who was enslaved, their life was just a complete waste. There was nothing good in it. The good that they might have found in life was destroyed by the master, by the slave owner. And this guy, as if he's not equally enslaved in some way as the slaves themselves, in chains. If you value enlightenment, if you value human understanding, slavery is not a bad way to go. To be a slave is to have more opportunities to recognize and understand the authentic situation in which human beings find themselves. Possibly even a more authentic understanding of God conceptually. So many different ways that that's not what I want to say, but I hope you get my point. That he's presenting a set of values to us. He's appealing to this very simplistic, Americanized, socialized point of view, which is actually anti-humanity. It's inconsistent with human nature, and far more inconsistent with Christianity than with Judaism, where Judaism has a much stronger appeal to a social identity that has been put on this earth to contribute to the good of the tribe, not to the good of humanity, but to the good of the tribe. Inasmuch as humanity inasmuch as humanity benefits from the good I do as a Jew, it helps the tribe also.
Torture other human beings? I mean, and mass murder? My God, it drives me crazy that people could be so naive, because people don't want to confront.
Mass murder, that's a good phrase, as if it's possible, as if such a thing could even be defined in a meaningful way apart from the legal system and a political object. We want to blame this or that symbol of leadership, and we use a term like mass murder. What about mass birth? Do we have mass birth? If we can't have mass birth, you can't have mass murder. Oh, look, this leader, because this leader was so good, we had a boom in births. No.
Painful realities. Though the irony is, it's not painful. I have known people are not basically good since I was a child, because I was raised in a religious Jewish home.
He's known this because he was raised in a place where this knowledge was available to him. It's like a library to be raised in such a home.
I went to a yeshiva, a religious Jewish school, half the day in Hebrew, religious studies.
See, this is an advertisement for why Jews are good and why, and you in America, particularly you Christians in America, you are constantly being fed this. You turn on the television, you are constantly being fed the idea that Jewish is good, and that Jews are not up to nefarious practices, and they are not manipulating you, and the media is good, despite the fact that it's dominated by Jewish influence, and the movies you watch, despite the fact that they're, if there's an enemy, if there's something bad in those things, for you, the Christian conservative, it's the leftism, it's the liberalism. That's the problem, the lefties. It's those leftists, not the Jews. But I would say, to the extent that the leftists are doing bad things, they are following from a tradition of scholarship, an academic community, an academic tradition, not even a tradition, a trend from the 1960s into the present, in which the strategy is to wag a finger at the bad people. It's the anti-Semite strategy, just placed in other areas of society. So you wag a finger at the homophobe, you wag a finger at the racist, you wag a finger at this is one strategy that runs through the whole leftist agenda. And this man, one reason that he has managed to dupe all of these people into thinking that he's one of them, I mean the Christian conservatives, which he's not, by the way, is because he considers himself against the leftists, who more than likely, I will take a guess, right? Just bear with me. I will guess that the reason he is against them is because had they continued, had we had more Abby Hoffmans year after year, decade after decade, and the Weathermen, and all of these Jewish conspiracy groups that were trying to undermine the society, the white-dominated, the Christian society, if that had continued, people would have turned against the Jews. So he recognized early on, 1969, he's like, that's just bad PR. The Weathermen, that's bad public relations. the more he probably looks at somebody like Weinstein, and the main thing he thinks when he sees that is, look what you did to our community, Weinstein. As a Jew, you have hurt your tribe. And that's far worse for a man like this, in my guess, I'm guessing, for a man of this mindset, than whatever he did to women. I don't have a problem with Weinstein. I don't like all the hysteria surrounding this. I have trouble recognizing how a rape occurs, and I don't even get me started on that. Well, not that you would get me started on anything at all. Is anyone still watching me? That's good. That's good. I want to build a following. Subscribe to my channel, people, and we will take over the world. I've got my 80 subscribers. We're kicking ass, taking names. Tell us more, Father Pragenstein, Mr. Glenn Beckenstein, Rush Limbaugenstein,
today in English secular studies.
Rush Lindenbaum.
Did this till I was 18. I'm very well grounded. As many of you know, I'm writing a Bible commentary, The Rational.
Oh my God, he's writing a Bible commentary. I mean, how clever is that? The Jew is going to tell us about the Christian Bible. That is really Judeo-Christian. He paved the way with the Judeo-Christian terminology. Now, he's just another Christian type. Imagine a non-Jew writing a commentary on the Torah, and then in Israel telling everyone how he's writing a commentary on the Torah. Christians are so easily duped. Rubes. What is the etymology of the word rube? Deadpool. Why did that? Siri suggestions? Fuck off, Siri. I don't even use Siri. Add him online, people. Add him online. That's the way to go. Rube, 1896, from shortened form of masculine proper name Reuben, which is attested from 1804 as a conventional type of name for a man in the country. Hick. So what's... They don't tell us any more about it. That's rather discouraging. Well, Reuben is a Hebrew name. Behold a son from Ru. Yeah, but Hick, Rube Goldberg, no. Rubenesque. Where did it come from? They don't know, eh? They don't know. From shortened form of masculine proper name Reuben. Where? In America? In England? Who? Who was doing it? When they say this little, it's quite possible that it originates in Jews. You look at it. I mean, it's so consistently Jewish people from urban areas particularly in the United States, but I'm sure it was true in other contexts. But so consistently make fun of these white Christians living in small towns in middle America somewhere, who they don't bathe as often, and they don't shave, and they spend a lot of time on the porch drinking beer and firing guns at bottles and so on. Go out and get in the pickup and head over to the general store and chat with the barbershop people. Jews love to make fun of these people, and it's a common type that you find in Hollywood movies and a cartoon like Andy Cap. It's interesting to me. I just saw this movie called The Death of Dick Long, and the whole movie it's about a group of rednecks in Alabama who fall in love with, who as teenagers apparently began to practice sexual games with a horse, and one of them, I guess I'm giving the plot away if I say that there's a death involved due to, I can't say it, but I won't ruin the movie for you, but there's no Jewish connection here. that I know of, but it's just so cliche. It's a kind of anti-Semitism that no one is trying to protect against. You know, the redneck American. Being from Mississippi, I'm kind of sensitive to it. Okay, Mr. Prager, let's keep the conversation going.
Bible. I've done 2 of the 5 volumes thus far, and I got a great
5 volumes of a Bible commentary. Good God. The horror. What if... I hope this man just disappears from the historical record, as so many have in the past, making false claims of scholarly appeal.
Christian kids do. Christian kids who go to Christian school know people are not basically good.
How did Christian kids know this? Tell me more about Christians.
Secular people who tend to believe people are basically good.
It's what people?
People are not basically good. It's secular people who tend to...
It's secular people who think that... This is blowing my mind a little. I'm trying to make sense where the secular falls in his little rubric of value of people. Because in a sense, he's making a rubric, you know. These people are worse than these other people. Everybody's not good, but some people are worse than others.
People are basically good. Secular people don't believe in God. So if you don't believe in God, you better believe in humans.
What about Muslims? I'd love to hear what he has to say about Muslims in that context.
Or you really have nothing to believe.
He hates Muslims. He positively hates Muslims. You can comment later and tell me where I'm wrong. Direct me to the proper reference point at which I can find his balanced view of Islam. Please, direct me. Look at that face. Good God Almighty, just look at it. Wow, there's other spirits rising up in that moment. That's not all Prager, man. That's like a host of other spirits moiling around within him, and a bunch of them have risen to the surface and gone, ugh. What was he saying in that moment? Secular people.
Believe in humans.
Let's say it again.
Secular people who tend to believe people are basically good. Secular people don't believe in God. So if you don't believe in God, you better believe in humans.
Why does he have that look on his face? What is he so excited by? What does he think he's accomplished in that moment? If you don't believe in God, you'd better believe in humans.
Or you really have nothing to believe in.
Or you have nothing to... So, I see, because he must hate humanism. Certainly he hates the tradition of the humanities. That's my thing, by the way. My thing is the tradition of the humanity. That's my religion, man. That's my religion. Shakespeare, prophet. Cervantes, prophet. St. Augustine, well, actually, he probably wasn't taken as a prophet. Lao Tzu, prophet. I don't know. I could pick out my favorites. Plato, prophet. The counterpart to Jesus, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that Jesus read Plato and then went and started talking. Where was he in his 20s? He was reading Plato. That's what happened. That's what happened with Jesus. Reading, he adopted the views of Socrates. So he doesn't like humanism, and he's really excited to have made this impromptu connection with secularism, humanism, without God. I think he's probably done this plenty of times without God. I think, to say that you believe in the human is in a sense to say that you believe in God. God is the agent of the human, and I as an individual am the agent of God. We have this mutual agency. So I don't really need to refer to God. I could just refer to the human and accomplish as much in trying to make sense of the world. But reference to God is a shortcut and a valuable one, a very beneficial one. but it's not the end-all be-all. It's not the only thing to which I might make reference. He clearly, well, good on him. Good on him that he's recommending God. But the problem is he knows his God is different from your God. Assuming, I'm assuming you're Christians. Funny that I don't assume any Jewish person would sit and listen to me. He knows this. I think he absolutely knows that in essence, there is no Christian God. There is only the Jewish God, and though secondary and though pale comparison, the Christian God is at least, those people are at least aware of the presence. They're looking, they're like in Plato's cave. They see God from there. The Jew sees God directly, so to speak. Can't see God directly, but the Jew's right there with the burning bush, and the Christian is in Plato's cave, and the light source is the burning bush. The Christian doesn't even see the light source, but sees shadows on the wall. Probably the shadows on the wall. Here we go. Just hang on. The shadows on the wall are the Jews. So the Christian sees in Plato's cave, looking down, they see the shadows on the wall. It's the Jews out by the burning bush. I have a feeling no one understands what I'm saying.
World, there's no God and people aren't basically good. That's bleak.
Truer words were never spoken. Adjust your tie. Adjust your tie as a reward for what you've just discovered.
But I'll tell you why it's actually not at all a bleak idea to believe the truth that people are not basically good.
Oh, it's the truth. I'm out of coffee, man. I need to make more coffee.
Then, among other things, and this has been true my whole life, every time I meet a truly good person, I'm delighted because I don't expect to. It's actually a pleasant surprise. Instead of people who believe that people are...
This is complicated. This is really complicated. And the way that he smiles at us in a very innocent and kind of boyish way there is unsettling. But it's psychologically valuable to assume people are fundamentally flawed and not good. He doesn't say bad, not good, because at times you will be surprised, and surprise is a pleasurable feeling. And then he smiles to show that pleasure for us. Let's look at his pleasure again.
A pleasant surprise. Instead of people who believe that people are basically good, they get disappointed all the time. So instead of being disappointed all the time, I am pleasantly surprised.
What a valuable thing. I'm going to base my conclusions about the world on whether or not it makes me happy. I don't like hearing about AIDS, so I don't believe. Doesn't make me happy. There's a lot of people out there like that. He's really, this guy's, he's good. He knows what to appeal to.
Wow, another wonderful person.
But what is the point of that? But if they're good, they weren't basically good. They've been mined. Who mined them? Did they mine? No, they didn't mine themselves. You can't mine the gold from yourself, can you? Please, Father Prager, tell me more.
I am never shocked if I meet a person who isn't good. It's never shocking. They're all over the place.
Oh, giggle for us.
It's never shocking. They're all over the place.
Aw.
So this is the most important question. In raising your children, it's the most important question.
Ah, tell us more.
How do I make my kid good?
How do I make my kid good? That's a scary... I'm glad my parents weren't thinking that.
Every time you say to your kid, say thank you, you're making your kid good.
Oh, okay. So that's good. If I say thank you, doesn't matter if I'm a serial killer. If I say thank you when it's appropriate, when I say you're welcome, when I say after you, when I open the door for people, these are all indications that I am good.
By the way, as I've always said,
Oh.
if kids are basically good, why don't you tell them once, say thank you, and the rest of their life they go around thank you, thank you, thank you. Why do you have to tell your kid 10,000 times, literally 10,000 times, say thank you, say please, say thank you. What do you say? Hello, you just got a candy. What do you say to Aunt Tiffany?
Tiffany, come on, I was waiting for a Jewish name. What would it be? I don't even know. Auntie, I don't know. Sarah.
Thank you, Aunt Tiffany.
Tiffany. He's good. Now that to me right there, that's an indication of him picking out his audience. He's not speaking to Jews. This man is not speaking to Jews. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining the movement.
That's what you teach your kids. How to be good.
Your Tiffany's and your Buffy's and your Reginald's.
Not how to feel good. How to be good. That's the most important question.
Interesting that a moment ago he said that the benefit of thinking people are fundamentally not good is that it makes him feel good when he meets a good person.
Society can ask. That's why this is the single most important question if you want to make a good society. What do you start out with? What is the human material?
I don't think that's the question, because you could just take Plato as an example, and Plato's worthy of your interests, Mr. P. But Plato wouldn't have said, are people basically good? Plato would say, what is virtue? And how does it come into the world? And I think Plato would say that, to be virtuous is to act consistently with human nature, to be consistent with your nature. To do good, to be kind, is to recognize that you are in the company of your kind. Humankind. Kindness is how we treat those who are of our kind. And that kind of logic, that connection where the thing comes together and we are acting in accord. The note is tuned properly to the scale, that is the human scale. That is so much more valuable as a tradition than what he's recommending. Because what he is recommending is, how do we manipulate society? How do we manipulate our children? How do we instill in them the behaviors that will give them the appearance of being good? And only behavior itself is the good. Intention is nothing. Behavior is the thing.
Okay, let's go do your questions. Here we go. All right. First is a video question each week. A nice innovation, I might add. Was that your innovation, Megan?
Megan.
Wow.
How much money do you bet Megan is Jewish? $100 to everyone who takes me up on it. I'm probably wrong, but I'm laying it down there. Putting my money where my mouth is. Megan is Jewish. Megan, drop me a line. Drop me a comment, baby.
You felt a little self-conscious taking all the credit. I asked Megan if it was her idea. She said yes. Then she thought, no, Rodrigo as well. All right. Here we go.
Rodrigo.
First question.
Hi, Dennis. My name
It's
is
Candace.
Owens.
Are they pals? Oh, God.
age is none of your business, and I live pretty much everywhere, but mostly on a plane. My question for you is this. You attended my wedding, but you forgot to leave sage advice.
Wow. Okay, no surprise, no surprise. The connection, the two are together. No surprise. Listen, Christian conservatives, you're being Rubens.
What would be your advice for newlyweds, especially in such a crazy culture?
Crazy culture.
Well, I am totally touched that Candace Owens has called in with a question. I really am.
I'm sure it helps your viewership on both sides.
Magnificent. She is a gem, and I am delighted. And you could watch her on PragerU. She has her own wonderful podcast each week, and she's a gift. Well, first of all, I didn't leave sage advice at your wedding because nobody asked me for sage advice at your wedding. I don't walk around, would you like some sage advice? I don't do that. Many of you may not know this, but anywhere you live in the world, you can hear my radio show on the internet, or go to pragertopia.com and you can subscribe, and you get it without commercials.
Come on.
Anytime you want. I do 3 hours a day.
Where's the marriage advice?
On Wednesdays, I do a male-female hour. I've been doing this for about 15 years, maybe 20.
There's no marriage advice. Isn't it interesting? It's about to end.
Talk to men and women, and I.
Is this the advice? Be easygoing.
This will sound almost trivial, but the first thing that comes to my mind is be easygoing. You don't want your spouse to walk on eggshells. If you're easily offended, what happens is your partner then stops being real. Now, obviously, if you're offensive, if you're an offensive partner, then your partner will get offended. But I think it's a great goal to be easygoing. This is true in all of life, not just in marriage, but it's certainly true in marriage. I'll give you an example. I was talking to my younger son. We had a long conversation today. And he asked me, so how you doing, Dad? And I told him, really terrific. And he somehow mentioned...
He's boring us. Am I right?
The remodeling of the house, how's it going? And it's taking a long time. He said, so, is it annoying you? And I said, I gotta tell you, it doesn't annoy me. Because, so what?
What a guy.
Is my whole family healthy? Are you all doing well? Do we have a good relationship?
This is, it's interesting. I hear this all the time from the many Jewish people I've known. There's a kind of and I'm sure it's from non-Jews also, but certainly it is. There's a kind of, and I always am suspicious of it, and maybe this is proof that I'm a narcissist, but I always find it's sort of like a social gesture. In the moment that I hear someone talking about, well, my family is healthy, so I'm happy. And when my children are happy, therefore I am happy. If that's true, just don't even say it. It's like you're boasting of having compassion. You're boasting of your sympathy. Why would you boast of such a thing? Admit the opposite when it comes, because it will come. You are going to have moments when you show no sympathy at all. Those are the moments when you should call attention to yourself and to your emotions. Not the moments when you're proving to us that you're a fundamentally good person because you love your family. It's like these people, Hispanic people in LA are so involved in talking, and black people also talking about their mothers, and they prove something by proving their affections for their mothers. And I think just keep it to yourself. Really, just keep it to yourself. It's boasting.
That's That's what matters. You know what? Do you know two of the most powerful words that you could ever say in your life, whether in marriage or not?
Here we
So
go.
what?
So what?
You have to always
Why not say it to the anti-Semites?
look at the big picture. Because if you focus on the minutia, you'll always get upset. Because
See, already I can see that this guy is appealing to these Christian conservatives who are like, to racism, so what? Which is why we love Candace Owens, because she's saying so what to racism, so what to sexism, so what to all the isms. But all this guy has, what he focuses on, is anti-Semitism. Just quickly, if I may, look at this contents page on his book about anti-Semitism. 1. Why Jew hatred is unique. 2. Anti-Semitism. So what? Well, let's say so what to all of these. Anti-Semitism, the hatred of Judaism and ethical monotheism. The chosen people idea as a cause of anti-Semitism. The higher quality of Jewish life as a cause of anti-Semitism. Non-Jewish Jews and anti-Semitism. That's probably complaining about the Weathermen and Abby Hoffman and these Jewish activists. Other theories of anti-Semitism. Part 2. Anti-Semitism in the ancient world. Christian anti-Semitism, Islamic anti-Semitism, secular anti-Semitism, the Enlightenment, leftist anti-Semitism, Nazi anti-Semitism, anti-Zionist anti-Semitism, 8 lies about Israel. What is to be done? The meaning of anti-Semitism for non-Jews. It ends there. It ends with the final, push to those non-Jews. It's written for non-Jews. And it's presented as if all of these things actually should be, separated and analyzed. And I'm sure at American Jewish University, they write whole books about all these different forms of anti-Semitism. And the books themselves are completely prejudicial and racist and ethnicist, I suppose you could say. As they are, desperately, crazily, obsessively trying to control the world's thinking, to produce as many works as possible to push the idea that anti-Semitism is the worst possible evil, as it actually says on the title page, right? The most accurate predictor of human evil. So if you don't like Jews, you're just evil. That's all there is to it. And you who, what's in your heart? Oh dear me, I don't like these Jewish things. Must be something wrong with me. So what, my ass? So what, my ass?
There's no doubt on any given day there is something to upset you.
I'll bet, Candace Owens, who's got a big so what, she's probably a strong feminist. She probably has strong sentiments about how women are treated and equality and all of this. So these are people that are choosing their battles, but they're no different from the less focused leftists who the universities are producing. That is what universities now produce, are unfocused leftists who, in every direction that they turn, they're like what is that thing? A gun that's on like a pivot that can spin all the way around in circles. I can't remember what that's called. That's where the leftists are now. They're shooting bullets in all directions because all around them the enemy is at work. Serpentine Semitic smile. I didn't want to go there, but
So
be easygoing. Let's be easygoing about anti-Semitism, shall we? Can we? I'm hungry. I want to take a break, but I like the idea that this just goes on all day. And I kind of get a kick out of that idea. Maybe that's just too much. I'm going to have to let him go. Maybe he'll come back later. I don't know. Thank you all for coming, though. Really happy to invite you into my quarantined living room on day 36, when the world has gone crazy. The culture has gone crazy. Poor Candace Owens. Crazy culture. Crazy world. Ciao Pascal, amigos. Vámonos.